Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the More Survivalists, and in this case updating the situation with the war in Ukraine. We have Fox News telling us that it's not a bluff. Well, it kind of sounds like one. This is what the dictator over in Russia has to say. Always remember, Vladimir Putin is a dictator.
Наша страна также располагает различными средствами поражения, а по отдельным компонентам и более современными, чем у стран НАТО. И при угрозе территориальной целостности нашей страны для защиты России и нашего народа мы, безусловно, используем все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Это не блеф. Граждане России могут быть уверены, территориальная целостность нашей Родины, наша независимость и свобода будут обеспечены. Подчеркну это еще раз. Всеми имеющимися у нас средствами. А те, кто пытаются шантажировать нас ядерным оружием, должны знать, что роза ветров может развернуться и в их сторону.
So, I don't know if you realize, it's the exact opposite of what Fox News, for whatever reason, it's always interesting to notice these things, but we have Tucker Carlson always saying that Ukraine is not a democracy, yet he never said, not once, that this man is indeed a dictator, and he is a dictator. If you're 20 years in power and you don't have any kind of working democracy, as failed or as imperfect as it may be, you're talking about a dictator. So Vladimir Putin is a dictator. Tucker Carlson never said that once, even though he insists on Ukraine not being a democracy. Now, Fox News is telling us this is not a bluff. So you have the little dictator over there with a nuke in the background. Now, when you listen to what he says, he's victimizing himself. He's saying that the West is the one threatening him with nuclear weapons and the wind may end up blowing the other way. This is what he just said. You saw it yourself. One more thing. Notice how he's playing the victim card. In 20 seconds, he mentions twice the threat to their territorial integrity, independence, and freedom. This is what he's saying for Russians. He wants to play the victim card. We are being threatened. Now, in what insane, idiotic mind do you have to be to think by any stretch of the imagination that it is the West that is threatening Russians' territorial integrity? That is absolute, complete bullshit. He knows it. He's just playing this card for the local community. And if you look at what they say in RT News, is the official Russian channel. So, you couldn't get more pro-Russian than this. Again, the idea that the West wants to partition Russia like USSR. So the idea is I'm going to be scaring my own people into signing up to this insanity and enlisting, which they obviously don't want to do. So he has to force people to go over to Ukraine, go over to a foreign nation and fight and take over. The bullshit about we're fighting the Nazis, we're liberating Ukraine. That is no longer the case. It's no longer the case that we're liberating Ukraine. It's no longer the case that, as he initially said, that Ukraine was Russian all along. So we're just taking over what's rightfully ours. That was his first excuse for the invasion, that it was part of Russia, so he was just recovering what was always theirs. Now the idea is we are being attacked. Who could possibly believe this? Well, either if you're a child or if you're isolated in Russia and don't have access to the real news that's available to the rest of the world because you're stuck in Russia with no freedom whatsoever, folks. Let's be honest about it. If you're living in Russia, you have access to very limited actual information. So this is the line he's going for. But keep in mind, this idea that it is Putin who's bluffing about, he's not bluffing, right? He's saying, I'm going to be nuking this. We have a saying that perro que ladra no muerde, dog that barks doesn't bite. And it's actually kind of true. If you ever seen the dog that barks the most is usually the one that it just keeps on barking. And the more you close in and you approach, it keeps on stepping away while it keeps on barking. So he's been doing this threatening kind of thing of, I'm going to be using nukes. Well, at the same time, he knows that if he does end up using nukes, he will get completely destroyed, which is a fact. He cannot even deal with Ukraine with a little bit of help from the West. Let's be honest about this. We've talked about this so many times before. Not getting involved for real, but at the same time, providing the weapons which get those very juicy contracts going, which the elite definitely benefits from. And of course, Ukrainians do welcome because they're fighting, a much stronger force. But keep this in mind: neither the United States nor Russia could deal with the opposition in Afghanistan. This is going to be the exact same thing. When people just hate your guts and don't want you there, eventually they'll kick your ass and force you out of their country. They don't want the damn Russians in this country, and it's painfully obvious. It's so sad that so many deaths on both sides, really. But let's be honest also about who's the aggressor here. It is Russia. They are the ones that invaded Ukraine. So as sad as it is, any kind of loss of life, well, I don't want to make the video super long, but there's phone calls of Russians calling local police in Ukraine wanting to hand themselves over, wanting to surrender, and just checking if it's true that they'll get their balls cut off because that's what they're being told by their superiors in the Russian military, so as to have them not surrender as soon as they cross the border. So you have people that fight, you have people that don't want to be there in the first place, you have people that just want to give up but that are scared of getting their balls cut off, which I guess it's a legitimate concern if you're a Russian in Ukrainian territory. But the idea that we should be sympathizing and having pity for the dictator that invaded the neighboring country, that is ridiculous. One more thing, remember what I told you. They identify themselves as Russia and former Soviet Union. They want to go back to the former Soviet Union. They want to go back to being the Soviet Empire. That's why they try to annex anything and everything that they are allowed to get away with. This is not a secret. This is not some kind of weird mystery. I was mentioning before in a previous video about how they took over a strip here in Moldova. Yes, these are Russian bases in Transvastia or whatever the hell it is. So they have a few assets there operating as pro-Russians in some other country, and they go in there, they occupy it, they have their military base. Oh, we are here protecting Russians. Imagine if, Mexico invaded Florida and say, oh, we're here protecting our Mexican community in the United States. No, that's not an excuse. That's not something you can do, and at least not in any kind of civilized manner. Anyway, he doesn't like that he got his ass kicked and he's being forced back. And, eventually they will face more and more opposition. He's just scrapping at the end of the barrel. Initially, the idea was to get away with this and have Ukrainians fold and just, keep all of this, just using contractors and some assets that are, not directly using the Russian people. Because the more you do this, the more you force people into going to a neighboring country, which you told them you were liberating them, the more obvious it becomes that it's not the case. So the more it starts becoming painful for the average Russian, not just the guy in the military, not just the guy that's being thrown from a prison jail into Ukraine and then surrendering, or not the mercenaries that you contracted, but you're using conscripts. You're forcing people from your country to go over and fight for territorial control of another nation because you want this, because you want to rebuild the Soviet Empire and you want a bunch of satellite states at your service. People are not going to be as cool with that as they were before, with the idea, oh yeah, it's just a special military operation. It's becoming more and more obvious for even people in Russia that that's not the case. Folks, it's going to be all for now. This, though, means that you're going to be seeing more and more conflict because this will not be over anytime soon. And of course, the possibility of this, escalating even further, always there. Also, the possibility of those in power and the elite taking advantage of all of this so as to take even more away from the average people, that is pretty much a guarantee. So prepare as best as you can while you still can. Street survival skills and surviving the economic collapse. My book's based on my experience surviving the economic collapse of Argentina. It has over 1,000 reviews on Amazon, and the links are available following there in the description below. See you on the next one. Take care.